Welcome everyone to the, what is today? The June 14th, 2022 Winchester Planning Board meeting. We are being recorded via WinCam and also via Zoom. If you don't wish your face or your voice to be recorded, please turn off your video and turn off your audio. We do have a quorum with us this evening. I'm going to do a quick roll call. Eugene Scott.
Present.
Sally Dale.
Present.
Dia Jarius is present. We are joined by Town Planner Brian Zucchelli, our Recording Secretary Nancy Polcari, and I believe our Assistant Town Engineer Brian Manter. He was here just a second ago, as well as our consultants from Form in Place and other citizens. So very quickly, let's do a very quick update. So the ADU working group, which is composed of Planning Board, Housing Partnership Board, Council on Aging, Disability Access, and Winchester Housing Authority. I think I got them all at once. I don't recall if we told in this meeting, we noted that we did have what we thought a pretty good start-off public forum a couple of weeks ago where the idea of ADUs was introduced. We had some presentations from our neighbor Arlington. We had someone from Arlington who'd helped them with set up their ADU program, and we had someone from the MAPC talk about ADUs, and we had some local stories. So it went pretty well, I believe. I think we're ready to start our next phase of public outreach on that. I also want to note to the planning board, hey, Nick, you want to say you're here? Oh, with your...
I am here, present.
Okay, thank you. So Nick Rosettis, our fourth member. The other thing for this board, just as a scheduling thing, so we are going to be having a meeting with the Historical Commission coming up in July, a co-meeting of the boards, as well as hopefully the Disability Access Commission. I don't know if they've been notified that we want to meet with them, but in case the word gets out, we want to meet with you folks. So if you have any agenda items, like anything you want to put on that agenda for discussion, please send them to Brian, who will pass them on to me. And then I will be meeting with the chairs of those boards so that we can finalize the agenda. And so we're trying to get our periodic meetings with other boards on track.
Sorry, very quickly, Dia, just before the end of this week, that would be great. If you had any agenda items that you would like to get on, excuse me, if you would, an agenda items that would like to get on the Historical Commission, yes, by Friday would be great. Thank you.
And yeah, so we usually meet for about 45 minutes to an hour in a joint meeting. So it's not going to be a full 2.5 hours. So keep it short and sweet. And that's all of my, oh, and of course the tree working group, the trees working group had a great booth at Town Day just a week ago or so. We had a lot of great interaction with residents and non-residents talking about how we can preserve and enhance the tree canopy in Winchester. And Sally has her hand up.
And I can just follow on that, Dia, by saying that we, at very short notice, have a table at this Saturday's farmers market to continue the momentum of reaching out to our community on the subject of preserving and expanding Winchester's tree canopy.
Thank you. And the Trees Working Group is a group of the Planning Board, the Climate Action Advisory Committee, and the Conservation Commission. Okay, I got them all. Yeah. Okay. On to you, Brian. Do you have anything you want to dip into for the next 1 minute?
I will say that I have put in my weekly updates that we were possibly going to apply for a community transit planning grant after several conversations with Sustainability Director Kim Pruitt, Council on Aging Director Philip Belts. We kind of determined that our best course of action was to wait for the townwide transportation master plan to finish in order to get projects that are come out of that plan and then use this grant funding to apply for that. the idea is that it's really not fully baked what we need at the moment in terms of, do we need a fixed route shuttle? Do we need on demand? And do we even need a new 15-person shuttle? So there's a lot of information that we would still need to know. And since there's already the townwide transportation master plan, as well as the Council on Aging that apparently now is very exciting, getting a new minivan to be able to transport 2 people in wheelchairs. So this is just, there is a 15-passenger van, but if it's only picking up 1 or 2 people, it's kind of a big deal to take the shuttle down. Maybe so they're getting a new minivan. So because of that, we've decided to hold off on that grant. With that, I think I'll stop with the updates, but that was the one thing that we were going to potentially apply for, that now we have decided, as Ken and I, as well as Philip, that now is not the best time to do that.
Okay, thank you. I think we're still waiting for a few more people to show up. We have people are notoriously casual when they show up for these things. So why don't we give it a couple more minutes?
If that's the case, I can certainly give more updates.
Yeah, I just want to say, I want to thank Sally and Rich Rohan for leafleting North Main Street and some of the environs, I believe. They handed out, I don't know, thousands, millions of flyers, a lot of flyers. And I really appreciate that. So
Make that 130.
130. So
well, we do now have almost 60 people on the tree mail list. So it balloons from about, I think we got something like 40 something names that wanted to get on that list from that event. So that's hugely successful. Here comes Kurt, by the way, our 5th planning board member. So that's great. That's a great base to start interacting with a little bit over the summer, but really more in earnest starting in the fall, leading up to a potential spring bylaw. Outside of the tree working group, I do have a few more updates. One, I guess in 2 weeks when we meet again on June 28th, there's going to be Holton Street visioning phase 1. So this is kind of the first work that we have done in that corridor, and we welcome people to come to that Zoom at 7 p.m. on the 28th. So the same time that we usually meet for planning board meetings. That's happening in 2 weeks on June 28th. And I think that's it for me for the moment.
okay. I just realized that we do actually have viewers out on WinCam, so it's really hard to tell how many people are watching this. So if we wait for all of our WinCam, we will never know how many WinCam viewers we have. I do want to, since Kurt is here, Kurt, if you could pipe up and say you're present, then we'll know that you're officially here.
I am present. I'm eating dinner, so I'm going to keep my camera off for all your benefit.
Okay, thanks. I hope the game went well.
Big win. Big win.
Right.
Brought home the trophies.
Yay.
Thank you for that.
So why don't we get started? So we have with us today Michael Wang and John Rufo from Foreman Place. They are our consultants looking at the North Main Street corridor, looking at design guidelines and zoning changes. And just as a very brief intro, so most recently, the planning board worked with MAPC to come up with an existing conditions study, which came out a couple of years ago or a year or so ago. And that study laid out the where the buildings were, things like property values, probability of development, and things like that. And North Main Street has been, so I live a block off of North Main Street. I've been here almost 30 years. And I'd have to say North Main Street has been constantly constant over that time. Not a lot of development. The town has tried to encourage development by putting in a village overlay district many years ago, which would focused on a couple of important intersections, hoping to get some development there. That didn't really seem to take traction. The North Main Street corridor was pointed out in our 2030 master plan as being an area of economic development. Thank you. And you can see its numbers 4 and 5. Main Street, North were areas where we wanted to focus our attention on getting more economic development. And also this is part of our transportation corridor. We want to make sure that it is more pedestrian friendly. It's also a place where people or kids can, if it were safe, go down North Main Street and go to school downtown at McCall and the high school. It also is bordered by a residential area, which was noted in our master plan as being an area for preservation and enhancement, the historical neighborhood. So we want to be sensitive to that. So this is also the largest commercial corridor outside of the center business district. And so while we know that it will never grow to the size where it would tear off a huge chunk of the contributions from residential property tax, it is nonetheless an important area where if we get good economic development, we will see some alleviation of the property tax burden. So it's also a great area to put in affordable housing, it's a gem in the rough waiting to be developed. So that's my intro. And then I'm going to turn it over to the professionals. So.
Okay, thank you, Diab. Well, this is Michael Wang from Foreman Place. And for those of you who we have not met, I'm also joined by my partner, John Rufo. Foreman Place is a small architecture, planning, and urban design firm based in Newton. And we have enjoyed over the years working on both the public sector side of the equation as well as the private development side of the equation. And we sort of feel like our experience sort of walking on that seam has been very informative to both sides of the equation. So anyway, we've enjoyed our collaboration with the planning board now for about 1.5 to 2 months as we begin to distill pieces from recent studies. And as you can see up on the screen now, the action plan, a piece of the action plan that came out of the master planning effort. So I think I'm just going to jump right in here. And what we'd like to do tonight is kind of summarize some of our conversations about goals and visions for the North Main Street corridor that we've been discussing for the past a couple of months. Looking forward to pushing this further in the new fiscal year, hopefully. And we're going to break the presentation into sort of 3 10-minute sections, ideally, which will allow for brief periods of comment between each section. Hopefully, Brian or Diab can facilitate by acknowledging hands that we might see up at, and John and I will focus on the presentation and thinking about answers to your questions. So this was the sort of vision statement that came out of the 2021 MAPC study, and very simply, an attractive and eclectic mix of new and historic buildings that are connected with consistent streetscape and landscape features. And I think that that's something that the board and we have worked towards, the idea that there are aspects to the corridor that involve thinking about the future development of various key parcels along the corridor, but also a really important aspect is the future qualities of the right-of-way, the streetscapes, and how those two things can sort of work together in unison and provide a sort of a consistent and continuous sense of a corridor which is an extension of downtown reaching to the north. So I think probably many of you are familiar with the MAPC study. Anyway, you can see some of their recommendations here for zoning changes, including things related to the quality of building developments on various parcels, aspects of building siting, which is a very important thing, how buildings relate to the street, to the corridors, as well as ideas about how to improve the aesthetics of the public realm that they front onto. So I thought I would just take 1 second before we really jump into this first section and just remind folks, I don't know if you all, I know you've been through a pretty extensive stakeholder process with MAPC last year. And I went through and looked through some of your comments as we began to sort of distill where the vision might be headed. And I pulled out a few things that I thought were particularly interesting, just as a sort of a framework here of public feedback that has been received recently. And I think, it's interesting, the first bullet point, 68% of people say that the corridor is due for some substantial change. When you think about what people would like to see, the top 3 answers were sort of a mix of residential and business uses, integrating more small outdoor spaces, and increasing restaurant choices. Things that people seem less interested in seeing were sort of cutting back on auto-centric uses, which are a valuable piece of the equation, but do present certain challenges to the quality of pedestrian environments. So it was interesting to see that response. Questions about density, and there was a very favorable response to adding some more density to the area. And with that, perhaps affordable housing. A high percentage of people felt that there should be at least 15% of new units should have an affordable component to them. And then some other interesting components that I know that people have been sensitive topics, things like building height limits, what is the appropriate height for buildings on the corridor, and what other design aspects can help mediate some of the worrisome aspects of that, such as how buildings that are on the corridor impact the abutting properties behind them. And there's also some interesting mixed responses, such as reaction to buildings' relationship to the street. 36% of people felt that buildings in general should be sited farther from the street, and 39% felt, oh boy, they should be closer to the street. So there's lots of ways to think about that, and I'm sure that many variables that determine why people are thinking about that in various ways, including height and open space, et cetera. So this is, I'm going to jump in now here on the first section. There's sort of 3 critical components to enhancing the corridor that we've sort of come to. One is the idea about creating a framework that incentivizes the desired approach to development along the corridor. As I said, that includes the mix of uses, as well as the character and siting and scale of buildings. You then, the second part of our conversation will be about aspects, ideas about enhancing the public realm. And I'm talking specifically here about streetscape improvements, making pedestrian environments more desirable. And then thirdly, we'll talk in more detail about complete streets as a concept, and not only with respect to sidewalk environments, but in the third section, thinking about the right of way and how you add bicycle lanes and sort out all the different users of the corridor. So that's the general breakdown. I'm just going to jump straight into part 1 here, which is basically looking at ideas about future development along the corridor and some of the goals that I think are being considered. Having the appropriate mix of uses will certainly increase the vibrancy of the corridor. There's opportunities here, as we mentioned, for housing diversity. What's the appropriate density? What are the appropriate affordability percentages? And then, what role does development play in contributing to the definition of the streetscapes on the corridor? and as I mentioned, impact on the abutting properties. And these are things that will be addressed through things like zoning amendments, as Diab mentioned, and design guidelines, and they can be combined in any number of ways. So I thought I would just spend a couple of minutes here. John and I did a few sort of visual analysis of the corridor. And this one looks at a few key nodes along the corridor. I'm not going to show you every single one of these given our time constraints, but to point out that as I'm sure most of you know, you have the two districts currently, the GBD2 in red to the south, and the GBD3, and they have certain uses that are favored in each one or allowed in each side, with commercial being essentially limited by right to south of Swanton Street. There's been some interesting conversation about whether Swanton Street really, I mean, given that it is an important node, but is it really a logical transition point for moving from a type of development you might like to see to the south versus to the north, and it has been suggested that perhaps Clark Street, which you see there as well, is also another way to think about a transition place along the corridor, because that's where the residential neighborhoods to the west begin to engage the back edge of the abutting properties. So anyway, let me just quickly move this along because I don't want to be too long-winded, which I tend to be. I apologize. This is really to point out that there are aspects, design aspects of existing conditions along the corridor that are the kinds of things that one might want to address with when thinking about future development. And we're talking about development like strip centers, which are held back considerably, maybe 70 plus feet from the sidewalk edge, and with parking in front, and how that is tends to not make as well defined or pedestrian friendly environment. As you move up to the north, you can see aspects of development that have positive qualities to them. You can see here clearly efforts to include architectural components that one might typically find in design criteria, like pitched roofs and facade elements, corner, marking the corner, siting it up on the street, etc. But in every instance, you also have to think about the complete picture of a parcel like this, and note that there's quite an expanse of parking that has a visual impact on the corridor and on the sidewalk environment. And something as simple as introducing landscaping buffers, limiting curb cuts, et cetera, can take this a step further as we consider future criteria. Just continuing up the corridor, just short of Clark Street, you have a lot of auto-centric uses. This one location happens to have about a 260-foot continuous curb cut, which is something that can be challenging, again, for pedestrian environments with cars crossing potentially at any location there. You also have a condition where you have a parking lot on the corner of an intersection here, where one might prefer to see some built form. So these are the kinds of things that can be studied further. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but again, positive and challenging aspects to each of these locations. I think a building of this scale and the level of detail found on some of the back facades, and you can see how that building feels from a scale perspective to a number of the surrounding homes on the back. So while it has a presence that is appropriate scale-wise to the corridor, and especially across from Bellino Park, there are other things that might be considered in the future for how to transition that to other surrounding aspects of sites like that. The Swanton intersection I mentioned earlier is a fascinating one to me, because it's a place where it's a node where you might expect development along the lines that outlined in the the VCOD overlay district that Diab referred to, you might expect more development intensity here. So buildings that are perhaps at least 2 stories in height would be, useful. And again, you see a parking lot on the corner as opposed to potentially having a built form on the corner. So that's another example of that. And as we move again to the north, and I'm just about getting to the end of the sequence here, clearly buildings like this have the Russell Hill building have interesting relationships to the street. There's at the north end of it, it's closer to the street edge. It has a thoughtful landscape environment. And of course, as you move to the south, since the building is not on the same geometry as the street, you then get the introduction of parking in front of the building, something that, again, starts to break down the sense of definition to the street. And lastly, this is an interesting location to me. You have a building that is, hundreds of feet long facade here, the medical office building, and yet it's about 12 or 13 feet high, and sort of a pancake approach, and across from the gas station, and so they're just, all this is just to give you a sense that there, and as you well know, there are just a number of fascinating conditions along the corridor. So the last couple of slides for this section here, I just wanted to say, we have spent a great deal of time working. These are some examples in Newton, putting together design guidelines. In this case, it was for a 1 million square foot development that's being sort of inserted into a corridor location, not to scare you, but in Newton. And we were looking at design guidelines at multiple levels, kind of at the district level, or perhaps in our case, the corridor level, and then aspects that might control the design of individual blocks, such as open space integration, how buildings meet the ground, how you handle parking and service and access, and then of course building design, dealing with overall architectural character, issues of height and massing, roofscapes, materials, etc. So this is a kind of a framework. When you dig a little deeper into some of these categories, like the building category, you can see there are a number of things that one can outline in terms of buildings and their relationship, their role in urban design. And then you also have aspects that are buildings and their architectural design qualities and the things that you're hoping to see in terms of, like, for example, facade articulation, organizing rhythms and dynamic qualities and architectural elements that mark the corner, ideas about fenestration, et cetera. So these are sort of higher level design guidelines as opposed to very prescriptive standards. And, we can work together to sort of figure out what's the right level of criteria for this particular corridor area. So I'm going to stop there and just sort of open it up to, that's sort of the first section, sort of thinking about design guidelines a little bit and future development, and just see if anybody has any comments or thoughts there.
Thanks so much for that, Michael. So I think the easiest way we can do this is you can either, if you go to, to raise your hand, you can go to the more, the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen. That would be the easiest way for me to see that you would like to make a comment. So I guess what we're looking for here is that, do you have any thoughts so far on really what the corridor is and what the corridor potentially should be? Is that kind of the prompt here, Mike?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we're not really focusing on the actual sort of complete streets, public realm aspect of things at this point. This is more just thinking about the quality of these parcels that might be developed in the future, and the things that people might be wanting to make sure are controlled in a certain way, where certain types of development might happen, those kinds of things.
Great. So if when you do raise your hand, or if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, if you could identify yourself and your precinct, or potentially your address, just so we can get that in the record for our recording secretary, that would be appreciated. Also, if your full name is not in your screen name, if you could fill that out. I see just a couple people who don't have a full name. If you could do that, that would be great.
And
I
if
would
we don't
imagine-
have any comments, Brian, we can jump straight into the next one and save time at the end, but whatever works, it's fine.
Sure. Well, I will certainly keep it open for another few seconds if people would like to raise their hand. John Serbier of the Housing Partnership Board, but maybe you're talking on behalf of the board, or maybe just yourself as a resident. Why don't you go right ahead, John?
Okay, John Serbier from the Housing Partnership Board. I was trying not to ask this question, but since no one else asked the question, I will. The Department of Housing and Community Development has implemented draft guidelines that they will finalize within the next couple of months for the development of multifamily zoning within MBTA communities on areas that are served by commuter rail and bus service. Winchester is currently designated as a bus community. There is a bus line along this corridor. One of the possibilities that Brian can elaborate on that Winchester is considering is using the North Main Street corridor as a way of responding to DHCD's guidelines. And so my question is, how is the DHCD MBTA community zoning work being incorporated into this effort?
Mike, I could probably take that first.
Sure.
I think that we need to wait for those guidelines to be finalized before we kind of incorporate anything into this potential rezoning. The thought was that we could potentially use GBD 2 and 3 to count towards this density requirement related to within a half mile of the train station. However, a bulk of this corridor is more than a half mile. So to answer your question, John, is that we're very much aware of the requirement, but we're just not sure if this will actually fill that gap or actually be responsive to the DHCD guidelines. So it's unclear what we can put in there because we don't know what's final yet. Those should be finalized by the end of the summer, which this work is still going to keep going on. And I would imagine Foreman Place would take that into consideration because this is something that the planning board has thought about. It's just unclear whether or not it's going to work.
We'll add that just a rough takeoff on Google Earth a while ago got me a half mile to somewhere between the Burger King and the Dunkin' Donuts. So that's about the extent of the radius there. But those sites on the southern part of the corridor are larger, particularly on the east side, and potentially conducive to that type of development.
John, did you have a follow-up before I move on?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, the question is how much flexibility DHCD is going to allow. They got a lot of pushback. They have support from the state agencies, but not so much from the local agencies. And I think it's going to require some creative thinking to respond. And I think this is a logical corridor to think about.
Thank you for that, John. I agree. Diab, I saw your hand up, but it's down. If no other hand is up, we can keep the train moving.
Okay, we will do so. So I'm going to talk through one more section here, and then I'll kick off a third one, and then let John sort of talk about the last piece of this puzzle. But the sort of second section, as outlined earlier, is just beginning to imagine the possible enhancements to the public realm, streetscape improvements, really making what would make pedestrian environments more desirable and walkable, And we've mentioned as we sort of look through some of those existing conditions, issues such as curb cuts and ideas about minimizing pedestrian and vehicle conflict points. Clearly, things like landscaping, regular pattern of street trees, which may require hopefully some rethinking of some of the utility lines. But in any case, elements that can be provide sort of visual continuity along the corridor, such as street trees, lighting, and other urban furniture, amenities, et cetera, would all be important components to realizing this as a piece that sort of ties together the corridor, even if different types of development are happening in different locations. So public realm design standards, there's those pictures in the lower right-hand corner here are pictures of recent streetscape improvements in Newtonville. And I have a few more images here, but first I thought I would share this diagram of what a complete street is. And so you can see here the streets that sort of are streets that are accommodating all modes of movement, vehicles, bikes, and the parking and amenity zones, sidewalks that are broken into different kinds of zones, such as a storefront zone, a walking zone, and an amenity zone where you might have outdoor dining, you might have bike racks, all sorts of things like that. And we'll talk about that. Obviously, there's a requirement to have a certain size of right-of-way existing. This is an example of a 44-foot wide right-of-way. What we're working with, by and large, on North Main Street is 42 feet, so it's close. And probably what gives is the dedicated bike lane is likely to be more of a sort of a shared approach, but it'll be a comfortable shared dimension because with a travel lane, I think, Brian, you were saying we're targeting sort of 10 feet. And I think it almost gives you a full width of a dedicated bike lane. So anyway, these are some of the components of complete streets. And we're going to look at sort of the sidewalk aspects of them first. As I mentioned, here's an example, some pictures from Falmouth showing outdoor dining, showing this idea of a storefront zone, the pedestrian walking zone, and amenities. And it's a whole range of amenities that can be everything from outdoor dining, as I said, to other urban furniture. So here's a before and after on the Newtonville project. In the upper left, you can see there was a big void lane in the middle that was actually used for delivery trucks, which is kind of an unfortunate place to have delivery trucks and for any number of reasons. But the redesign, and this was a project that was done by Harriman. And you can see down here in the lower left, a rendering showing how they essentially got rid of that zone in the middle of the right of way and expanded the sidewalks to create those different subzones, and it makes it quite a nice usable streetscape. The diagram that you see sort of in the right center shows how they're in every corridor, and this is about a quarter-mile long corridor that goes from the bridge entry is the bridge that goes over the Mass Turnpike, and it goes through the village center and then down to the high school area. Every one of these projects has multiple zones, if you will, that transition, and you can see bike lanes take different forms as they move through an area like this. You'll have some areas where the right-of-way is pinched down, in this case, to sort of get increased sidewalk zones. And so you have a shared bike lane configuration, and then there's an area down here as you approach the transition where you have enough width to get dedicated bike lanes. But this is about a quarter-mile long, which is as compared to the North Main Street corridor, which is a little over 3/4 of a mile. And this project, this enhancement project, I was talking with folks in the planning department just yesterday, was about a $5 million improvement. So just for order of magnitude. So again, thinking about zones, as you move, through this was another sort of analytical approach that we took to thinking about moving from south to north and the qualities of the streetscapes. And again, you can see we're working with a 42 foot wide right of way, but the definition of that really changes depending on what is fronting on the street. So you have the 72 foot setback here at the town pantry, and a nice street edge on the west side. As you move farther north, you're now dealing with auto-centric uses and the curb cut issue, and then you have these other commercial uses that have parking lots in the side yards. So you're getting a little bit more of that sort of popcorn feel of development, where the street wall is not so continuously defined, but at least the parking is not in front on the Dunkin' Donuts side there. But so each one of these conditions is slightly different, and like I said, it'd be nice to get some aspects to make this have a sort of visual continuity, while also hoping to set forward ideas about preferred development approaches to how buildings contribute to the streetscapes. This is across from Bellino Park. You can see here the nature of that cross section. And then just to the north of Swanton, you get a little section of streetscape here that begins to feel like a decently defined street. And it's a very short across from each other, but it's a 42 foot right away and a 60 foot building to building face. And those numbers I want you to remember, because we're going to look at that again as we continue to move north. You can see here we've got a decent definition on the east side, and then again parking with no landscape visual buffer, no real definition to the street edge on the west side. And so then if you go just across the town line, as I'm sure you all know, and get up into Woburn, you've got the same street section here. You've got still have the 42 foot wide right away and the 60 feet building to building, but quite a different feel than some of those other street sections that we looked at. And obviously there's so many variables in terms of building height and whether that's appropriate. But you do have sort of a lighting and street trees and other components that are contributing to the quality of that street environment. So, and that is the second part of the equation. Pause again, Brian, if it's helpful.
Sure, yeah. Sorry. So the public realm is obviously an extremely big part of what we've heard so far. So hopefully people will have some thoughts on what, sorry about the dog, on how to enhance the public realm, which is an extremely important part of this corridor.
One thing, Brian, while we're waiting for people to raise their hands, is that it's also just good for us to hear observations that people have noticed, maybe even as much as it is to hear about their ideas. Things they've observed, I think, is useful too.
Thanks, John. This is supposed to be very free flowing. So it could be a question, it could be an observation, it could be something you want to see, something you don't like. Richard Rohan, go right ahead, please.
Let me get myself unmuted here. When Sally and I were walking the corridor last week, one of the issues that came up in discussions with business owners is the difficulty in some parcels of getting delivery trucks in and out of the site. And I was just wondering, in the Newtonville example, how did they, how was the delivery issue dealt with?
Well, it just so happens in that location that there are parking fields on either side behind the storefronts. And I think just because of the nature, and John, you probably could speak better to this than I can, but due to the nature of the scale of the shops, you don't tend to have sort of larger vehicles. But do you want to embellish that, John?
Yeah, there are a couple conditions there where the street layout is such that there's a number of sections of buildings that you can get behind them pretty easily off a secondary street, Richard. And there are some conditions there where the trucks in their various hours will pull up and unload right on the street. So that does happen. You know, it's tough to solve for every condition. But I think guidelines are the kinds of things that can, or standards are the kind of things that can try to tailor the development and the layout of site toward trying to get loading off the street if it's possible.
Okay, and it may not be possible with some of these parcels, which are, some of them are rather small, and
Sure.
I think getting a truck around into the rear of some of these parcels for deliveries, I think it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
It's just one thing. I just one of the concerns, as I said, that came up in discussions with business owners, and I don't know if Sally wants to elaborate.
Well, I can also add that you know, that zone that is the parking zone in the sort of reconfigured right away can serve so many different functions, and it will also need to accommodate, you know, transit stops, and you know, so you've got many different functions going on, and certainly deliveries you know, can be a part of that equation. But Sally, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, no, just the gentleman we spoke to, there's 3 restaurants right at the intersection of Swanton, or right in that block there. And he said, you know, delivery trucks can all come at once. There's no place for them to go off street because the radiuses are too tight on the side driveways into the back lots. And so I think he was responding to the bike lane idea, saying, well, we're going to have to do our unloading in the bike lane or whatever. So I put it on the table just for, Rich and I put it on the table because we heard it when we walked.
Great.
Thanks for that, Sally. And I'm gonna hand it over to Diab. He has a question, but just, we had a few people join. So just wanted to let people know that right now we are having a small discussion on trying, if you have any questions, comments, observations about how to enhance the public realm along this corridor. So please, Diab, go right ahead.
Yeah, actually, Rich, thanks for bringing that up. That was actually one of my questions. And I don't mean to put you and Sally on the spot, but so what I don't know that we'll be able to solve the existing problems with delivery. I'm hoping we don't make them significantly worse. So I'm trying to understand sort of what the scale, I mean, again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but the scale of the delivery of vehicles is this, I mean, currently we don't have dedicated delivery zones anyway. And I'm wondering, I mean, they take up whatever space they need to take up right now. Did the people you spoke with give any ideas of what things could improve their delivery?
No.
Okay.
Richard?
I'm just sort of throwing questions out because obviously we need to talk to him. Yeah.
He said it's a big truck.
Okay.
That's a technical term.
No, I didn't hear any others. I didn't hear solutions either. And I just throw it out there as an issue, I think, of the business owners along that North Main corridor. I think it has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, because I mean, Cambridge is going through a rather deep discussion about how redoing streetscapes affect the ability of people to get to businesses or to deliver. And I want us to make sure that we learn from that, and we don't as we move forward.
Diab, actually, I wonder if it's maybe, to your point, more of something we should keep top of mind as we think about zoning for new development, just to really make sure we're thoughtful about how delivery is managed, whether that means like pushing parking to the rear of buildings and, you know, pushing buildings to the streetscape so there's like access in the rear for delivery. I mean, maybe maybe that's where we can focus our energy and take that feedback and try and apply it.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering, Michael and John, in the places you've worked where there hasn't been this handy place to pull off in the back of the property. I mean, do you have any wisdom from those sort of developments?
Well, we're sort of going to get into that a little bit more
Okay.
In the next section when we look at the actual streetscape. I mean, I think that we have some examples from Cambridge that show different configurations of where the bike lane is, and for those who have seen in Cambridge trying to be ahead of the curve and think outside the box and have the bike lane sort of between the parking and the sidewalk, you can see that also presents, complications in terms of connectivity between potentially loading and parking vehicles and crossing the bike path. But I do think that it really, in certain areas we can, as we saw in the Newtonville Village Center area, we can adjust the dimensions of the various components of the streetscape because, and I think we obviously want to also enlist a transportation group to help with the design of the more sophisticated aspects of the design of this. But the simple aspect of how much can you pinch down the width of a parking space when it's adjacent to a bike lane. So maybe it's in certain places where you're trying to get a little more storefront, continuous storefront. It's important to have a little more slack in the width of the parking zone because it also doubles as a loading zone, and then the shared travelway bike lane can sort of pinch down a little bit in that particular type of location. So I think there are lots of variables to play with, and we can continue to dig into that further.
Sally, go right ahead.
I wanted to just raise one other question or concern that was raised when Rich and I walked North Main Street, and this was from people who live on Russell Road, which is that U-shaped road with the historic house inside it. They said it's a one-way street. You enter at the southern end and you exit at the northern end. And they said the northern exit is extremely dangerous. It's really, really hard. Visibility and volume of traffic, etc. So I want to put that on the table to address. I know the same condition exists next to Meineke on Glenwood, and I'm sure that there are many other streets where it's residents regularly experience safety issues pulling out onto Main. So that's my comment to add to the mix from our walkabout.
Hey, Sally, could I ask, was the reason for the safety issues, what did it have to do with? Was it mostly about sightlines, or was it also about the speed that cars travel? Maybe some of everything, do you know?
I think it was a combination of sightlines and speed. I think there is parking restrictions on either side, north and south of the northern exit of Russell.
Yep.
I noticed when I pulled up there, I was like, oh, this is good. There's no place to park here. You have to park here. But apparently it's still a problem.
Yeah. And I think, things like introducing bump outs to narrow the dimension at crosswalks, like is done at the intersection with Hemingway. Those sort of visually tend to give clues to vehicles to slow down, and that can be achieved in many other ways as well. So we'll definitely keep that in mind.
I Ching, I see your hand raised. Go right ahead.
So this is a question about language, maybe. So part 2 is about enhancing pedestrian environments. And I noticed that you picked out from the master plan that it, word for word, walkable pedestrian environments. And Main Street right now is very car centric. And I can understand maybe designing for the pedestrian might ameliorate, make that, feel of cars being central to the street a lot less so. But between the car and the pedestrian, there's the biker, right? And there's the bus rider, and we're talking about the shuttle for Winchester as well. And because Main Street has such an effective bus route, and it's being rerouted from going down Main Street, instead of going down to Main Street to Medford Square and then going to the Orange Line, is being suggested to go down Main Street and go towards Porter Square. So, and to the red line. So
David.
that's gonna
David.
generate a lot more, I think, ridership, but also if we are encouraging density, there's gonna be a lot more multiple uses of that road, including bus and bicyclists. So I wonder if we could, maybe it's the fault of the master plan, or maybe there's more to this context, but instead of focusing so much on the pedestrian, could we then, for the collective consciousness, like think about pedestrians and bikes and bus riders and the public realm in a more collective sense?
And that is what the third section of the.
See, I should
But
have read it.
I'm just trying to break it into three different things, but they are obviously so connected, obviously, but that's.
Okay. All right. Awesome. It's a good prelude.
Richard, go right ahead.
Thanks, Brian. And this is a question for you, or maybe for John Soubier, because this may predate your time in town. But I recall that when town meeting rezoned the large parking lot that's south of the Catholic Church as part of the process of putting in the rezoning for the school there, that there was some development agreement that was signed with the town. And I have no idea whether that development agreement is still in existence. If it is, how does it affect this process?
Diab, I know your hand's raised because I think you have the answer. Go right ahead.
So Richard, you are correct. There was a development agreement that was signed by the select board with the owners of the Children's Corner, I believe.
Mhm.
And the development agreement essentially only mandated that we create zoning to accommodate housing on that parking lot. It did not mandate that the Children's Corner actually develop it as housing.
That is correct.
So the development agreement said either you bring this to town meeting or the select board will bring it to town meeting. That's what was done. And there was essentially no teeth in that agreement. There's nothing more that we can legally do to change what's on that lot. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm curious how that affects this process of rezoning.
I would say it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Just that. I don't think it does. We still have a little bit more time. I do see a number of residents that are on that haven't spoken, and I know all of you walk or drive or bike on this corridor, and I'm wondering if there's someone that hasn't had the opportunity to talk yet would potentially step forward and kind of talk about some of the challenges that they have, either walking or biking or just kind of living in the corridor, that are related to that public realm experience. So we have had a number of people from the planning board kind of highlight a lot of potential issues, but and I know there are a number of people that we haven't heard from. So I was just hoping that there could be anyone else that would like to tell us a quick story or give us a quick question. And if not, you want to think about it, that's also fine. We have about 35, almost 40 more minutes left in this. And we have to get through part 3 and a little bit more after that, but we do have some time, and I would like to make time for people that haven't spoken. So it doesn't look like anyone's jumping, which is fine. But maybe I'll just turn it back to Mike, or actually maybe it's John now. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll kick it off and then pass it to John, but I think why don't we just sort of complete the equation here by jumping in more into the right of way, if you will.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi, this is Kelly Fisk.
hello.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah, yes, go right ahead.
So I do live on Russell Road, and I'd like to second the concern of when you do exit Russell Road, it's not so much that it's the traffic, it's that the amount of parking space that's limited to the left as you come out is the equivalent probably of a bus length. So I had spoken up, I'm not sure when the last meeting was, but I'd spoken up that it'd be great if that could be moved back, because when you have to edge out what I call the New York crawl, you have to edge out to see the oncoming traffic from your left when you come out of Russell Road, basically. And that's the concern. I understand you did a bump out and a crosswalk a little further down, but it still didn't impact leaving Russell Road as far as safety. And I'm a pretty aggressive driver, meaning I'm not afraid to drive. I grew up in New York City, so I know how to drive, but it's tenuous coming out of there on a regular basis. So I'd like to say that, and also too, my experience of walking up North Main Street. It's wonderful when you get to the park, but going past Burger King and Dunkin' Donuts and the car wash and everything, it's like a cacophony of just hits your head. So it would be wonderful to somehow soften North Main Street. I understand you need to consider all of the businesses, but as the previous speaker had mentioned, including the walking experience as well as the biking and bus, it would be nice that the word beautification was truly kept in the first paragraph of the final write-up. So that's my thoughts. But I do want to say that coming out of Main Street, now I'm not one to hesitate driving, but I often find myself just holding my breath and inching out another 2 feet to hope that a car isn't coming too quickly, for the very fact that it needs to be pushed back a little bit further, even another couple spaces. And it doesn't even have to be a truck. If there's a car there, you just can't see beyond it. So I thank you for the time, and I hope we can make this part of town more, let's say, more, let me choose the right word. Let me be diplomatic. It's something that's a little bit more welcoming and serene, bring a little serenity to the area. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for speaking up.
Thanks,
Okay.
Kelly.
Looks like we're fostering a little pollination here. Okay, Anna Kova.
Yes, good evening. Annie Nikova, thank you. It's the first time I ever attend one of those meetings. Thank you everyone for looking into the North Main Street. I would like to, since we're having this conversation about safety with the driving and getting to the Main Street, I live at the intersection of Hill and Main Street, and I have the same experience for over 15 years. Taking a left turn is a nightmare. I'm just praying that no one will get hurt. And I know it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Cars drive pretty fast on Main Street. Traffic can get fairly thick during lunch hour, during commute hour. There is no visibility. I know there is some distance from the intersection where parking is not allowed. It's still not enough. We see nothing. And it's a matter of when. So I thank Sally and the previous resident who spoke about that. The residents would be very grateful if the planning involves some reshuffling of parking. We recognize that the medical office buildings need parking spaces, but the parking on the street is very dangerous.
Thank you so much. Could you also just your full first and last name for the record, please?
Yes, Annie, and you see my last name, Nikova.
I would. Thank you so much. Perfect. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, continue on. Okay, I think we've just by nature of the conversation here sort of shifted into this aspect of it already, which is great. But thinking about the actual design of the right-of-way itself and the desire to have safe coexistence of all modes, critical, but also improvements that such as crosswalks, perhaps adding additional crosswalks so that the spacing between them along the corridor is not as great as it is in certain locations. We have a diagram just to illustrate that. But also integrating, addressing accessibility issues at intersections and crosswalks is an important part of that equation. We talked about the elements that could provide continuity and consistency to the corridor, and the issues of beautification. And I think those are all critical components. We've looked at this, so I'm not going to dwell on that again. But this is an example of a rendering, a visualization that we did for Chestnut Street in downtown Springfield. And this was a conversion of a one-way street into a two-way complete street. You can see the green bicycle lanes incorporated there. And at various, the point being here really that at various moments along the corridor, the right-of-way gets narrower and wider. And you have places where parks get out to the street edge and there's no parking, which is conducive to an important right-hand turn. And then as you get farther down the street, you get the parking and amenity zones beginning to resurface here. So, and there's a transition from dedicated bike lanes to shared bike lanes. So I think the important thing is that this, it's not going to be just one street section all the way along the corridor. It can transition as you're trying to address various conditions from the parcels on either side. So here's some interesting images. The upper left is sort of Brookline Village, which some of you may be familiar with, and I think this is a quite a dense mixed-use setting. You can see a very comfortable street section here with the parking and the dedicated bike lanes. And then the travel ways. That's a pretty typical configuration. And then if you look across the bottom, you can see some examples of what they're trying to explore in Cambridge and also in Boston. And so in the lower left, you see an example of a protected bike lane that has dividers separated from the travel lane here. It also means the elimination of parking. And in fact, there was an article in the Boston Globe just a couple of days ago, which I've added here, about business owners in particular being up in arms about losing parking spaces in front of their lease spaces and how that's going to challenge their businesses. So that's something that we really don't want to do. In fact, so we need to think about how to accommodate all modes without creating problems for users along the corridor. The Boston example is a good one here, and you can see here the parking is outboard of the bike path, and they have signs up saying, pay attention here, and please go pay your meter, even though it's not right next to your car. So pretty comical, and then you can see all their other alternatives where the bike lane actually is more integrated into the sidewalk, and it's up on that plane of the elevated sidewalk area. And I don't think that that's a solution for this particular location, given the width of the right of way. But interesting examples. This last image in the far right here in the middle is from Portland, and always thinking outside the box out west there about how to integrate bikes and buses in one section of roadway, which seems like kind of a scary combination. But in any case, there's lots of experimentation going on how to accommodate all modes here. I'm going to get ready here to toss it to my partner John and let him share some of the visualizations that we've started to develop in a particular area here. This diagram shows some ideas about, it shows the length between current existing crosswalks, which tend to be generally less than 500 in a few locations. But then there's some larger expanses where you get into the 800 to 900 foot range. And it's not just about the distance, obviously, it's about the importance of those crossings and what's happening. Like Canal Street is one area that we've done a little more study on. And with that, John, I think I'll toss it to you.
Thanks, Michael. In this area that is highlighted on the screen right in the middle, this oval area, what we've done is studied this segment as a kind of hypothetical redesign of the right-of-way and the sidewalk area to look at what it would mean to implement visually the complete streets, and also the notion of what kind of things, I think, as Kelly mentioned, what kind of things soften the experience of people that people have as they potentially from either pedestrian or bike or car or bus or whatever mode they're traveling, how they experience Main Street. So you'll see a number of images on this segment in the oval here. So we're actually kind of flipped around the other way now in the way this is laid out. So to the right is south on these diagrams. The upper right is actually the Bellino Park. And so the upper image here is really what you have today. It's a fresh out of Google Earth image, where in the drawing below that, what we did was we mapped the overhead wires, which are you see the telephone poles and the dashed lines on the image below, kind of shows you where the overhead pole wires are. But more importantly, the street section itself is this roughly, typically 42 feet that Michael pointed out. And what you see here is what I would describe as a kind of undifferentiated sidewalk, and then a travel lane, 2 travel lanes in the middle, and 2 parallel parking zones on each side that are similar in size, and they just kind of whip along the street here without a lot of differentiation other than when you get to the sidewalk. So in a certain way, they have almost none of the complete streets things that Michael has been highlighting throughout the presentation here. So if you go to the next one, what you see, and maybe Michael, you can toggle back and forth between these 2 images. If you look at the bottom image, so this here is without it, and this here is then adding in plan a series of elements that we've talked about, which are the bump outs at the corners. So if you look at any one of these corner intersections, like on the right-hand side at Swanton and North Main, the corners grow with bump outs and create more real estate for people, for planting, for lighting, for all those kinds of potentially important things, and also for traffic calming, as we've talked about. You move to the left on this image, and the intersection, which is at Canal, is actually, we've added bump outs there. And some of the critical things that this is doing is when you look at these bump outs, it's literally shortening the distance that a pedestrian has to travel to cross the street. It's also giving visual cues, ideally, to people in cars, people in bicycles, buses, that this is an area that is beginning to, or in fact, is prioritizing pedestrian movement through it. And it's also creating additional real estate in the sidewalk zone, again, for planting, lighting, benches, and those kinds of things. And then what's happening here in this right of way is we're really looking at kind of a 14-foot shared drive lane and bike zone. And you'll see this in more detail momentarily. We've shown a dashed line on each edge that's approximately 10 feet off the center that would show what a car would typically occupy and require. We think that dimensionally here, it'll be more of a shared lane between vehicles and bicycles. So if we can go to the next image, what we then did is we took this sort of dry layout plan and we brought it into a 3-dimensional model, which we'll take you through in some images, some kind of aerial bird's eye images. But this is really the same plan that you just saw. We're adding cars, we're highlighting the bump outs, the crosswalks, and what you'll see in a moment when we flip it up into a view is the things like the street lights, the potential for banner programs, the impact of a tree planting program along the edge here, and other street furniture. In the lower right edge, lower right corner of that image, if you don't mind going back for 1 minute, Michael, no worries, is the typical, what is referred to as sharrows, which is the arrow that points the direction of the bicyclist, but it's in a shared lane with the automobile. So this is one of the ways that Complete Streets works in a street section such as this potentially. So then this is your kind of the bird's eye view. You're up over the street. You're looking generally south toward the intersection at the top of the image of Swanton and North Main with the park on the upper left. And you start to begin to get a feel of a really different sort of image of the street here, rather than the very straight sidewalks and a placemaking attitude that's really about the car. You're starting to really bias this towards the pedestrian and towards the experience of being on the street, and also the way that bicyclists, pedestrians, cars, buses, and all these different modes of transportation will ultimately share this roadway in a way that they don't really quite share it today. So if you zoom in a little bit more and you look at this image more three-dimensionally, you can begin to see the impact that regular tree planting, what we call street trees, regular lighting with potential banner programs on them, the potential removal of the utility lines and undergrounding of utility lines. And then the definition, if you can see here, of the sidewalk zone as being potentially different from a planting zone on the edge, so that or an amenities zone at the edge, so that you can actually give some different definition between where people walk versus how you might plant and furnish the edge that actually serves as a buffer between cars and people in the sidewalk realm.
That's often embellished with paving and et cetera. So.
Right. And I think those were prominent in the images that Michael showed earlier. So now you're getting down to where your eye level is kind of just above the tree line, and you're getting a sense for a more, I would say, a softer and captured street environment, if you will. Where visually the bump outs, the crosswalks, the presence of all the various elements that we've talked about are really impacting the environment and presenting a lot of visual cues that I think are also going to help to slow down cars and make drivers understand that they're sharing the roadway here with multiple other kinds of users. And then this last image, I think, is really telling, where, so Google Street View on top, right, that we've all looked at Google Earth and looked at the Street View. And then just below that is the potential environment where, you know, just looking at the percentage of blacktop here compared to on the upper image compared to the percentage of blacktop in the lower image, this is how you begin to sculpt an environment that again has more emphasis on the pedestrian environment and on the integration of various kinds of modes of travel, but also occupying the public realm. How is it occupied? How is the experience mediated by the various design elements in it? I will say that, you know, this is one segment of the street that we did as a hypothetical design exercise to begin to help people who don't do this all the time, the kind of the way we do, to visualize the beginning of what could be here in North Main Street, from what it is today, clearly, to what it could be in the future if this kind of program is undertaken.
That's great. I just want to say, I know I've seen these already, but I just want to say that Form in Place, you guys have really, I think you've taken and digested a lot of our first phase, and we're able to at least give us a taste of what some of those public comments that we received in that phase one on what it could potentially look like. So I just want to say thank you. I think you guys really hit the mark. Now's the time we'd really, if people want to kind of react to some of those really great visuals that were created, that were really based, like I said, upon that phase one that we had. Diab, go right ahead.
I just want to ask what the next section is. So if I ask a question, you know, I know that it'll be in the next section and I won't have to ask it.
There's no more sections, Diab.
Okay, so it's wide open. Okay, then I will wait.
There's only one last slide that supposes next steps, but anyway, we can touch that on or not. So
I will wait until someone else talks.
Hank, Lynn lives in the corridor. Why don't you tell us your address or precinct and go right ahead.
So Precinct 8, Tom meeting member, Precinct 8, and live on Canal Street. So just a quick question. We know Main Street has a gradient, right? So has any kind of visibility assessment done to for that gradient? We know that if you bike toward to the downtown, that you could bike pretty fast down the street, and while you climb up to the hill, I think that's also potentially to be an issue as well.
So are you asking if Form in Place has looked at the gradient, or whether the town has looked into potential traffic calming or other things there? Just
Yes, I think it's a mix of issues, right? So I just don't know whether the gradient is visible to build a bike lane on the main street.
Mike and John, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in here. I mean, I think as you go forward on this, we're certainly aware that it's not flat, right? We probably represented it fairly simply in how we've looked at this. I think as we move forward here, it's the kind of thing that I think a traffic engineer and a transportation specialist would need to look at and really think about that as part of the whole picture. So it's not something we've really addressed yet. But I think it's important. It also impacts sightlines where you can see as the road begins to dip off in certain areas, especially like at the intersection of Swanton and Main. So yeah, I think it has to be part of the equation.
Thanks. Yeah, I just to build on that a little bit. So Form in Place is looking at, potential conceptual drawings on ideas, really kind of brainstorming. Whereas what I think, Hank, you're talking about is the analysis related to, like John said, a traffic engineer, something like one of our traffic consultants that would be looking at potential traffic mitigating, speed reduction and less travel time for pedestrians across the street. Did you have a follow-up, Hank?
No, but I still think Main Street probably is not a best place to put a bike lane because of traffic volume as well as the gradient of the street.
Okay, thank you for that. John Serbier, I see you unmiked yourself, and there you go. Go right ahead, John.
Could you elaborate a little bit on how the street trees affect the ability of a person with a disability, who's using a wheelchair to travel along the sidewalks? It looked like the street tree was actually potentially blocking the sidewalk or a major portion of the sidewalk.
So Michael, if you can go maybe back to one of the images. This image. If you remember, John, I think it is, yeah?
Yeah.
One of the things we highlighted earlier on in the presentation was the complete street section that was, I think, and Michael can get to it now, is really helpful in understanding the prioritization of the different zones. And I think, so if you look in the lower left there, if you happen to have 12 feet to work with, it's one kind of design exercise. If you have 7 feet to work with, it's a different design exercise. But what we're trying to do here is identify the zone in that 7 foot, again, on the lower left, where right in the middle, there's a zone that is, I think, most typically similar to 4 to 5 feet as an area where for handicap accessibility, it goes through, and where the amenity zone that's toward the curb is then occupying an area that's a different dimension. And then if there's enough room, a storefront zone for people to occupy as they walk and shop. So built into the pedestrian zone here that you see this is the idea that your accessible route there does not have street trees in front of it, but that those are part of a different zone that is more about lining the edge and what's typically referred to as an amenity zone. Does that help, John?
Yeah, I mean, Winchester, like lots of communities, has a tendency to forget about and ignore serving the people with disabilities. And I think that's one of the questions I just wanted to get on the public record.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. It is one of the central tenets of complete streets. Actually, one of the first things they talk about right up front. If you look through the Complete Streets manual, it always has to do with accessibility and accessibility for people of all ages and all abilities,
including transitions to crosswalks, et cetera. So
yeah.
And yeah, thanks. So we would not be creating any new sidewalks that don't have 48 inches of clearance for wheelchair accessibility. And a little bit of history, John Serbier is, if you have been to downtown Winchester at any point in time ever in the past 100 years, it is extremely difficult. A lot of it is to do to the width of the sidewalks, but also the brick. That a lot of routes and make those bricks very challenging for many people, whether they have a disability or not. To be honest, I'm sure everyone has tripped. I guarantee at some point in the downtown. So I guess we'll keep going a little bit more here. If anyone has any other thoughts on some of these visuals, some of these visuals are really striking in terms of looking at the possibility of what the North Main Street corridor could be. I hope a lot of you find it extremely exciting. I welcome anybody who would like to speak to go right ahead. It looks like Kelly, you unmuted. You want to go first?
Yeah, I did. Right. So the trees would be in wells, tree wells, so that there'd still be an ability to maneuver a little bit about that. But my hope would be that you would address the tree wells with enough room for the trees so that they will do well, as opposed to just something like a pear tree that eventually splits. And I just do want to reaffirm that the trees and having that raised sight line of green is also something that slows people down. I mean, there's that impact of perhaps what some of us were raised with, being around more greenery, but just the psychological effect of that. So that's good to see. And also the fact that there are ramps at the bump outs. It is putting a lot into a small area, which basically what planning is. And I do hesitate about the bike lane also with the grading, how Main Street does truly run, because opening your car door when you come down your bicycle, whoops. I know you're trying to fit a lot into one space, but I do think the softening, and also mentioning too, from my experience, just making sure that the tree grades are adequate.
Yep.
No, for a longer term, not just 10 years. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Diab, go right ahead.
So I want to assure Kelly that this planning board loves trees. So I think we would make sure that those trees have a more than a fighting chance to survive.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I had, not recently, but I had been a very heavy biker, use of Main Street as a bike list, and I love going downhill towards downtown because it is a great gravity is your friend, and I have biked up that hill many times. So whether we put a bike lane in there or not, people are using that street for bikes. Having a bike lane, regardless of the gradient, I think will help with safety, as the people will then realize there are bikes. And yeah, so it is a struggle getting up that hill. It's not the only hill that you need to climb in order to get to this part of town. But I think we need it just for enhanced safety for those who do. I regularly use the bike in Cambridge, where the streets are much tighter and the danger is much worse. I think this will be having the visual element there will be really important. The other thing I wanted to say, and I just want to say this because many people who are watching may be wondering why we're spending so much time on the public realm and the streetscape. And I think it's because when this planning board looked at North Main Street and we tried to look at what the vision would be and what would be the biggest impact in terms of making this a welcoming place that people would want to go to, we looked at the streetscape and we said, hey, there's a lot that we need to look at here. And that when we start talking about how the buildings fit into it, the streetscape is really such an important part. And so this is the first part of our discussion as to the design. And just in terms of trying to, what do we want this to look like as people? And then we'll move into things like what do we want the buildings to look like and what scale is important. But we really wanted to start from the perspective of the human being on North Main Street and understand what it could look like. And I agree with Brian. I think that this is a very exciting view of the possibilities. So, and that's all I really want to say.
Thanks so much. Looks like we got, 5 and potentially if there's more people having questions or comments, maybe another 10 minutes. Just a quick check on the time. Go right ahead, Sally.
So I am so happy that all of your renderings presume the burying of the power lines. And I know that Winchester, which I don't think you would have a chance to know, over the years has tried to have pass at town meeting funding of burying of power lines. And so I just want to put it on the table for this planning board and for the community members that have zoomed in, that it's a tricky thing. Brian and Diab will have the institutional memory to remember how difficult it's been in the past. So that's one thing I want to say, is that let's go into this with eyes wide open, but with aspirations high. Because I have said this before in planning board meetings, I believe that if we build it, that is, if we beautify North Main Street, the investment, the private investment will come. And that this section of town should be absolutely as pretty and welcoming as any other part of town. And so I'm really psyched about burying the power lines and adding trees. The second point I wanted to make is, first of all, Kelly, thank you for being a tree person. We're all tree people. And I'm hoping that when we do the tree planting funding part of this whole project, that it will also extend down some of the untreed side streets. So that's another, putting an aspiration on the table, hoping that the community support and embracing of vision will keep the momentum. That's what I had.
Thanks so much, Sally. Anybody else? Charlie Dale, please go right ahead.
You're muted too. Oh, yeah.
Looks like you're muted, Charlie.
Is Charlie a little furry being, Sally?
Let me just say, I'm in the upstairs office. If Charlie Dale is our small furry being, he's in the downstairs office.
Unsure what to do about that at the moment, but feel free to unmute when you can, Charlie. In the meantime, if there's anyone else.
Okay, I'm here.
Hey there,
Sorry.
how you going? Go for it, Charlie.
All right. So I do want to point out that you have a great example at the intersection of Hemingway and the doctor's office, where there was a bump out created there a couple of years ago. And that actually does really begin to help, kind of soften that, create that view, especially if you look at it, the Google Street View of 2019. And one of the things that I'm a landscape architect, and I worked on the streetscape for Arlington, Mass Ave, from Cambridge to the center of Arlington. And wherever we could, we tried to partner with the homeowners on either side of the street, because one of the problems with street trees, if you don't get enough soil, they're about a 7-year deal for them to survive. If they get some help, they might be 10 to 15 years. But if you can plant them in the adjacent yard, much like what you see right across from Hemingway Street. You can create that edge. They have a lot more soil. The opportunity for that street to actually have trees that get to a large size without having to deal with salt and being damaged by cars and all is something that should really be considered. And there does seem to be spaces for that. And even if you don't get the ability or the opportunity to bury those power lines, it's just a matter of bringing them over, slightly smaller species, but that would really work. The Capitol Theater is one intersection that we're really proud of. It has on Arlington Street, there is a place on the corner there across from the theater where the restaurant spills out and has a series of tables and chairs right there on Mass Ave. So it looks like you're headed down a really good path here. This is really terrific. So
Thanks, Charlie. It's great.
Thanks so much for the feedback.
Yeah, it's good. That's great feedback.
I think I'll take one more and then maybe hand it back to Mike and John to close us out. But if anyone had any maybe one final comment that they just had to make, and if not, that's okay. This is certainly we are going to continue this relationship with Form in Place into the next fiscal year. So this will not be the last time that you see them. Nor is this anywhere near the last time that we're going to be done doing public information sessions and feedback sessions for this corridor. But if I'm not seeing any new hands I'll give it another 6-7 seconds here. Then I will turn it back to John and Mike to close us out.
Well, thank you, Brian, and everyone for this fantastic feedback. And we really are just scratching the surface here. We've been at this collaboration now for a little over a month and a half, as I think I said, and have just really enjoyed the intake process. And you all have done a tremendous amount of good work in recent years with corridor studies and master planning, visioning, et cetera. And so for us, this is just the beginning of the outreach component, and we look forward to, coming up with creative ways to solicit more creative feedback without, overwhelming you with surveys, et cetera. But just for maybe as we begin to hone in on particular directions. But I think, this will hopefully move forward on a couple of different fronts. Whether both sort of more in-depth studies of the right-of-way, as well as beginning to look at things on development sites that might be things that we want to begin to develop criteria for and define in zoning amendments or design guidelines. So I think there's a number of next steps here, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration in the months to come.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, John and Mike and Michael from Form in Place. I think I'm very much looking forward to see what you guys can come up with next in terms of your visual design skills. So I'm really happy that you were able to join us, as well as the number of residents that were able to join us as well. If you have any further questions for me, the planning board, or for Form in Place, the easiest way is to email us at planningboard@winchester.us. Again, that's planningboard@winchester.us. I'll now hand it back to DM.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Michael and John. That was excellent. I just also want to point out that this meeting is being recorded. And if you know someone who was not able to make it to this evening's meeting, if you email to that planningboard@winchester.us address, we can email you back a link to this. It is on WinCam. It's also being recorded on Zoom. So whatever is easiest for you. So at this point, I believe that we have to move on to zoning. So thank you very much again, Foreman
Thank you
Place.
so much.
It's
Thank you,
always,
Michael and John.
always a pleasure meeting with you folks, and we will see you soon.
Richard, great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you
Thanks
all the
again.
residents who came.
Yes, thank you as well. And thanks to Charlie, who's still there. Okay, so our next agenda item is, and we are slightly behind schedule.
Yep, just 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes. We have 3 special permits. Brian, you want to take these off? Start off on these?
Oh, I see it does say ZBA special permits, but they are not all special permits. They are zoning board of appeals permits. Some of them are site plan review, just as a clarification. That was my mistake. Okay, so looks like we do have the applicant here for 94 Church. If we are going to have any questions for them, I'm just going to go right into the analysis that I had for this petition 3964. This is at 94 Church Street. They are just seeking site plan review to be permitted to construct an addition where the total square footage of the single family dwelling will be greater than 5,000 square feet. This is located in the RDB zoning district, rather large lot at 22,000 square feet. The house was built in 1895 with renovations in 2008. The Massachusetts Cultural Resource Inventory record was attached with the packet. The Historical Commission voted 5-0, 2 people were absent, that the proposal had no adverse effect on a historic or cultural resource. At the time of this memo that I had gave the board on Friday, I had not received the DRC comments, but I did receive them since then. And going to get that really quick. Hold on, sorry for the delay. But the vote from the Design Review Committee was favorable action with no recommendations, all in favor of vote of 5-0. That does not happen all the time, so that that's great. The proposal entails a second floor addition over the 2008 addition to add a bedroom, a bathroom, and a laundry. There's no changes to the footprint. There's no changes to the landscaping. It's an extremely tasteful addition that adds living space to an already beautiful home, in my opinion. Due to the scale and location of the proposed addition, I do not see how this could negatively affect the neighbors or the neighborhood streetscape. I recommend favorable action with regards to this petition. Back to you, Deanne.
Okay, I just want to remind us of the I Ching rule, meaning we go through these efficiently. So I Ching, at some point you can tell me not to say that.
No, I love it. I love that. That's my legacy.
Okay. Are there any comments from the board? Any concerns of the board? Or is there a motion? And the board seems not to have any concern.
No, I'll start off. I think that it's a very tasteful addition, and I don't see any reason why, except for maybe the second floor hallway that connects it to the main bedroom. But it seems like it's fairly distinct and steps away from the main house. So I don't see a reason to deny that. So I would recommend favorable action.
Is that a motion you'd like to put forward?
If you want to go that quickly, I could.
We can make a motion, someone can second it, and we can discuss.
Okay, I make a motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second.
Okay, now we can discuss it. Any discussion on that motion?
I am very happy with what they've proposed, and I agree that it will not have a negative impact. And I think it's great. And I recommend favorable motion with,
So you're thirding the motion.
I'm thirding it. I'm on board with the motion.
Okay. I agree that it is tastefully done. I am a little concerned that it increases the bulk next to the original and somehow detracts from that bulk. But I think that's just my opinion, and it doesn't really matter at this point. So are we ready for the vote? I think we are. Kurt?
Aye.
Nicholas?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
Yi-Ching? And Diab says aye as well. And Nick, I apologize. I called you Nicholas. I hope that's not a problem.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I'm just reading my
We call him
screen.
when he's in trouble with his mother.
Oh, then it's the middle name that's important. The middle name always came out for me. Okay, so we have 5-0 in favor. Thank
Best
you.
of luck. Yeah, best of luck, Richard Leaf and Mike Pierce with ZBA. I know it's coming up in 2 days, but luckily our memo won't say anything other than way to go. So
thank you. Thank you all. See you next month.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Have a good one, Mike.
Bye. Thank you.
Let us move on to the next one.
Sure.
All yours.
Yep, the next one's 16 Lorena Road. Also seeking site plan review. This is a proposed addition that is actually less than 500 square feet, but where the total area of the dwelling is greater than 5,000. Property is located in the RDB. This is a new construction or relatively new construction built in 2016. Historical Commission voted 5-0, 2 absent, that the proposal had no adverse effect on a historic or cultural resource. And the design review committee made the motion that the ZBA grant the waiver requested as it's less than 500 square feet. All in favor was 5-0 again from the design review committee. And so this entails the construction of 280 square feet of an expansion in the rear of the home. It will use materials that will match existing. No setbacks are further encroached upon as a result of the proposal. I agree with the applicant that the height and scale of the addition is in proportion to the existing home as well as other homes in the neighborhood. I recommended favorable action with regards to this petition/waiver from site plan review due to the limited scale and scope as well as the rear location of the project. Back to you, Diab.
Okay, so I'm gonna break with tradition and have my piece first. So my concern with this proposal is that I actually have no idea what it looks like. I note that the lot map is actually not of the actual house. It says proposed construction on here. So this is, that's proposed house. That's presumably from, it says November 22, 2016, but it doesn't show us what the actual house is. So this is not an up-to-date, I don't know what that's called. And then the drawings are hand-drawn over something, and I cannot make this out. So I don't know what this thing looks like. The only thing I can do is say, based upon the small additional area, that you shouldn't need to go through anything extra. But I would highly recommend that something be improved in the drawings. I guess.
Hello, hi.
Yeah.
I'm the, my name's Jamie Pichelle. I live at 16 Lorena Road. And if I could start by saying that I thank you all very much for your service to the town of Winchester as members of the planning board.
Hold on 1 second,
No,
sir.
I just want to address your issues if that's all right.
I understand. I just, right now, it's the board talking, and I need to ask the rest of the board if they want to hear from you in response to my comments.
Okay.
It's just protocol. Does the board want the proponent to be able to just come in, or do we want to wait until the end?
I would say, Diab, since you just asked the question, if he's prepared to answer it, let's hear the answer while we're on the topic.
I agree with that.
Okay, then please go forward.
So Diab, and to the rest of the planning board, I would say that my one mission as part of, as Brian is well aware, because he's heard me speak on 3 planning board hearings, or 3 hearings related to a 243 square foot addition to the back of my house that no one will ever see, that I applied for a waiver under section 9.5.1A under the town code there is no process for me to receive a waiver other than to go through this process. And I think that I would like to acknowledge and ask the planning board to respectfully consider that it is at a minimum ridiculous that your time is being used to be spent talking about this, because I am ensnared in a process for which I cannot do what I want to do. The Design Review Commission acknowledged how absurd this whole thing is and specifically added to their notes that they would like something other than this to happen. So the reason the drawings are hand-drawn is because we haven't designed the structure that is in the back of the house that no one will ever see. We have ipso facto all of the engineering waivers. We have all of the work done. Everything that is related to this process is really bureaucratic in nature and not of any benefit to the town of Winchester. And so if I would like to be on the record saying that what I really view should be happening here is that there be a separate waiver process for a project that is 243 square feet and clearly not impacting any of my neighbors who all are in favor of me doing this, and that this is just not a good use of our collective time.
Thank you. I appreciate that viewpoint.
Brian Manter, the assistant engineer, has his hand up.
Hello.
Brian, go ahead.
May I add a little point of clarification? Mr. Chair, I observed the same things that you saw during my review. However, in chatting with the ZBA administrator, she helped give me further context as to what was supplied in the application that you see before you. So the applicant is applying for a waiver under the stormwater, like 500 square foot threshold, at which they are meeting that. So there is no requirement for them to do any further drainage review. However, that when the applicant goes for their building permit, the building department will require them to provide actual real rendered drawings so that they can make a determination as to what the applicant is proposing. So I hope that might answer your question as to the nature of what was submitted for you this evening.
Okay, I mean, I'm used to seeing the drawings that essentially go to, that are fully fledged. And so
I can speak to that also very quickly. Again, I'll reiterate that they're essentially applying for not having to apply. The drawings aren't there because they're applying for a waiver from the process. However, as the applicant said, is that they still have to go through this whole process anyway. So what is this? So I understand that. Brian Manter understands that. Right now, there is no process outside of going through this process, asking for a waiver. What really should potentially happen, and this is a little bit of an aside, is some type of an administrative waiver, whereas the building department says this is under 500 square feet. The engineering department doesn't have any issues with it, and it doesn't even get to us. That would be the point of a waiver.
I fully agree with that.
That was just a little more clarification.
Yeah, so we get there, I think, by is it a zoning?
It's us changing, or not really changing. We put the waiver in to try to make it easier for applicants, but it is not expressly stated that they don't have to go through this process. It's kind of a weird way.
Does it have to be an amendment through town meeting?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, well, we should do it for
let's do it. And I apologize if I came across as aggressive on this. I really looked at this and I really was unable to understand what was happening.
I think that if I may speak again, I have the luxury of being an extremely sophisticated utilizer of processes like these because I work in commercial real estate. And so I'm using my permit to point out to the town that the process doesn't work. And I think that my hope is that, in this process, that in speaking, what I know that everybody agrees that there can be some level of change. And so I thank you for, respectfully considering the circumstances here and that we could move through this.
I think that you have reached a very, what is the word I'm looking for? A receptive ear?
Yeah.
Friendly ear? I think
You-
we none of us want to see you here if you don't.
No, but I have spent the last, I have been on this call since 7 a.m. And what you guys are working on is so much more significant than my project. And I prefer that you spend your time and energy on that and not this. And therefore that's, so what I would ask of the planning board respectfully is that not only you provide an approval, but you also make a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, like the design review commission did, that a waiver process should be enacted for projects like this. Because and I know Brian's gonna say you can't technically do that, but I would ask that you at least copy the text of section 9.5.1A from the town code into your recommendation, and then at least leave it to be inferred. So.
The only thing I would say is that they're just barking up the wrong tree. That we would be the one to change the process, not the ZBA.
Well, then that's great. So then I'm having the right conversation with the right people. I am specifically requesting that you change this process.
You are barking up the correct tree.
Good.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
But Jamie, you go by Jamie Jamieson?
Yes, that's right.
Didn't the building department require you to come with construction drawings to get a building permit?
I mean, Brian, so when we worked with Janine on this, we explicitly applied for a waiver. And they were like, well, no one's ever done this before. And we said, well, we're doing it because this project deserves a waiver and no one cares about it. And so then they said, well, the only way you can get a waiver is to go through the process. And then my architect, Sally DeGan, who's terrific, by the way, not on the call, but she'll be on the call tomorrow with the ZBA. We just sketched the whole thing out and drew it up, and that's what you guys have. And yeah, it's sufficient to demonstrate that the project is insignificant. And that was our objective in doing so. Brian's heard this like maybe 4 times now, so.
Right, just to follow up on my question, at what point do you bring construction drawings to the building department to get a building?
We have to get a building permit. We have not applied for a building permit yet. So that's
yeah, just a little bit on Sally. So they can't apply for a building permit if they don't have this waiver.
Oh, so we have a fancy chicken and egg.
No chicken and egg. We just need to say a waiver is deserved here, and then in the next time that we can cook up a bylaw change to be very explicit on what a waiver means. It means that you don't have to go through the process to get a waiver for the process.
Well, I mean, since we're now all in this together, right, and I am exercising my rights as a citizen to share my thoughts. The way that the code is written says that the waiver it's subject to the zoning board of appeals determining whether or not it's sufficient. And so if you're going to focus on changing something, what you should really do is take the discretion away from the zoning board of appeals and say it resides with the planning board and the building department. And then you would no longer have a chicken and egg.
So we will move to a non-avian model of zoning.
Absolutely.
So why don't we take that? I don't mean, when I say under consideration, I don't mean to blow it off. I mean, let us put this on an agenda. This is obviously something I think we can do. We might even be able to do this by this fall. Who knows? Maybe we'll, miracles happen. So why don't we, if there's no other discussion on the merits of the process, which I think we've covered.
I do have a comment about the drawings, and I do think that the drawings actually are pretty clear to me, and I can read that they are sufficient. I can see the elevation, I can see the plan and the addition, and the call outs are sufficient. And to bring it to the level that you're asking to, Diab, I think costs hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to a property owner. And I think that is a very difficult process for most people. And I'm not sure that the sophistication of drawings that we're calling out for is necessary either.
I will readily admit that my ability to read drawings may be limited, but and that yours is obviously better than mine, but I was unable to understand it. So I
I
also
respect that.
I
will
also
also-
agree that I am not looking for, I understand that moving to a much higher level of sophistication costs a lot of money. So there's a continuum there. And I don't know where it should fall.
Well, I can tell you this. And first off, I will tell you that if you want my help in fixing this, I'm happy to share my thoughts and contribute to that. I can tell you to this point in time, I've already spent $2,000 in architect time, plus my own time in coming to these hearings as well, and making the argument. And, I guess I'm kind of, I looked at, as I said before, I looked at this as an opportunity based on, the process and understanding the law to help change it, because I know why this was enacted in the first place in 2016, 17. And I know what it's intended to do. And I know what I'm trying to do. And all I'm saying is that as a longtime citizen of Winchester, I am happy to help you, planning board, in fixing this in whatever way possible to create policies and procedures and do what you need to do as a practical matter, because I've just gone through the process and tried to navigate it in a way that satisfies people at a bare minimum level and is also affordable and responsible, because there's people who can't afford to do what I'm doing. So that's the point that I'm making. So
I think you have dangerously volunteered yourself, and we may take you up on that.
you may, and it's, yeah, you may, because I mean, I know that the engineering department knows full well that I've got a 3,000 gallon flow well in my backyard, and this thing would get hooked up to it anyway. And, there's all kinds of stuff like this that we as a group should figure out a way to do better and coordinate better. And not to say that you're doing the bad job, because you have better things to spend your time on as somebody who votes for you to be on the planning board.
Well, thank you. We do really appreciate it. And Sally, if you want to say something, and then if we could move to a vote on this, I think that would be.
Only
great.
thing I want to say is I want to make a motion that we vote to recommend the ZBA grant a waiver of site plan review for 16 Lorena.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please. I Ching.
Hi.
Nick.
Aye.
Kurt.
Aye.
Sally.
Aye.
And I say aye as well. So thank you for your patience in this process, and we will try to make sure that you are the first and last who has to go through this pain.
Well, I'm happy to help.
Thank you much.
Expect a
welcome.
call 10:30 tonight.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
that's fine.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. We're all just making our way in the world together. So
Yep.
thank you for listening to me and understanding what I'm trying to communicate. So I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Now we're on to 39.
On to 3966 82 Arlington Street. This might be the first month we have where it's all site plan reviews. But here we go. Petitioners are seeking, they're also seeking a waiver for site plan review, so it's to be permitted, not seeking waiver. They're changing a grade of more than 500 square feet by more than 6%. This is not a waiver. The property is located in the RDA zoning district and contains just over 23,000 square feet. House was built in 2012. Historical Commission voted 5-0 with 2 absent, that the proposal has no adverse effect on a historic or cultural resource. The design review committee recommended favorable action for the site plan or approval. It was an all in favor 5-0 vote as well from the design review committee. So this proposal entails the renovation of the current outdoor living space and patio areas and a regrading of the rear yard to make it more usable and the reduced stormwater runoff. New retaining walls, a potential sport court, and sections of new patio are planned for a total increase of impervious surface of about excuse me, 1,600 square feet. To offset this increase, the applicant proposes to infiltrate the runoff from 2,300 square feet of the impervious surface, which actually comprises that potential sport court I talked about. There was a couple of green space and hardscape calculations that were a little bit off, that the green space plus the hardscape equals the open area. However, the open areas, they don't equal the hardscape and the greenscape. It's off by a few percent. This should be corrected for both the sport court permit set as well as the non-sport court permit set. Neither of the open areas equal the total of the green space and the hardscape. Overall, I didn't see the proposal as a detriment to the neighborhood at all, or the abutters, based on these very low retaining walls and the increased amount of infiltration that is on the site. I recommended favorable action with regards to this petition, but leave any further comments to the engineering department related to the infiltration system.
And do we want to hear from engineering on that? I apologize, Brian. I should have called you in earlier on the other ones. Brian Manter, any comments from engineering?
Oh, that's okay. Do you have no worries for the apologies. Brian Kelly hit it right on the head. They are proposing to infiltrate more impervious surface area than they're proposing. Their design is adequate, so if built as designed, it should meet the intended goals of reducing runoff.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Comments from the board?
I think it's a gorgeous design, and it seems like the big retaining wall is facing with neighbors with a huge offset, and perhaps with a lot of screening as well, is what it looks like, and I just don't see any reason to stop it. But it's beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
I would agree. Keep it short. Follow the I Ching rule.
I may violate that.
I agree.
Sally, Nick?
I agree.
That looks good to me.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. The only thing I would add is are we also like facing something that's onerous for an owner? Are you suggesting, Brian, that there is something about sports courts that needs to be addressed in zoning to?
No, I'm not trying to raise any type of an issue. It seemed like the owner, and I won't speak for them, it looks like the applicant is here, actually. Brian Mulville, yeah. Hi, how you doing? If you want to maybe expand on that, I guess you were trying to see maybe if the sport court didn't work out in front of ZBA, you had the other permit set ready to go. Was that?
Yeah, for the most part, that's essentially it. They're a younger family, 2 young boys, very active. It's definitely on the wish list, but it's, we planned for the worst case in terms of runoff. As you mentioned, it's the 2,300 square feet of runoff on the hardscape and landscape surfaces, but it's also capturing the roof leaders that are not currently captured. So we're really trying to take all the stormwater into account so that we could give them everything they want if we get the go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything further on that?
Nope.
Yep. Okay.
I would like to make a motion.
Okay, sure.
No, Diab, we didn't hear from you.
Yeah, so I just, I noticed that you're taking down a number of trees, and 2 of the trees are definitely in the footprint of the renovation. But there are a couple of trees which are further down grade. 3 trees actually, which are further down grade. And I'm wondering why they're being removed.
Well, for multiple reasons, I think part of the process or part of the planning process for me being asked by the client was to create the outdoor living space, make that more usable, the sport cart option, but also for the yard to be more useful. It slopes significantly from north to south, and it shoots a lot of the water towards the Ockerbloom residence to the left. So besides the infiltration system that we're putting in, we're also going to be controlling the stormwater runoff by filling the left side of the yard with that retaining wall. and lessening the amount of gradient coming from north to south. But I also, in my visit, and I actually had a certified arborist write up a letter as well. None of those trees are really in great shape. The two existing white pines, which are actually in the footprint of the outdoor living space, have several issues with them, but structurally they're unsafe. He definitely recommended, I don't know if I sent that to Janine recently. I don't know if that came across to you guys.
I don't think it did, but that's not.
Yeah. And then there's a red pine, which is pretty close to those two white pines, which is infested with beetles. It also has scale. It's in a very evident state of decline. And then there's a scrub cherry down in the back corner that just isn't really doing anything for anyone. And then we are replacing, from a caliper standpoint, we're putting over 100 caliper inches back in. So we're actually repopulating with a lot of green space.
Okay, so I'm a little confused in terms of where the retaining wall is now. You're saying the retaining wall is actually going to run along the property line?
On the south side.
On the south side, okay.
I can bring it up.
Yeah, because
Yes, please.
that was, I had a problem reading this.
If you look at the if you look at the stormwater plan, it's a little bit more clear there.
Okay. The other thing I noted is that it would be really nice if you actually put the height of your retaining walls on the actual drawings. I know you stated that you had a maximum height of 36 inches, but it's really hard to understand that. So typically when I've seen, when I've seen these, they typically show the retaining wall height as it goes around, so you have an understanding of it.
Yeah.
So, now I'm looking at this, and where am I supposed to be seeing the retaining wall?
Brian, do you have the actual, this was sort of the master copy with all plans. This got condensed a little bit, became a little bit blurry. Do you have the separate file for this?
I do. That's going to take a little bit longer. This is the packet that they have, but I can, if you give me.
I have it open on my screen.
All right, I will give you permission now.
Yeah, I'd have to say your nicely bound packet, the drawings were illegible.
Yeah,
they did not work well.
All right, Brian, you can go right ahead.
All right, let me see here. Are you seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Let's see.
And I apologize to the board for violating the I Ching rule. Is this on D2?
Say it again.
Oh, no, go ahead. Keep going. I think I found it on D2 of your plan. Engineering drainage calculations, page D2.
Yes, that sounds.
So that is something that I did not understand was actually running the entire length of the neighbor. So the question I have is one of the things about this is to reduce the amount of cut and fill. Do you have an estimate of how much actual fill will be required to level that?
On the left side here?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you're going to level the entire yard.
We're really just trying to lessen the grade change. It's not going to be leveled. There will still be a slight grade change from north to south, which is basically what's happening now. It'll just be smoothened out by taking the contours and taking them down to that retaining wall on the south side. From a fill calculation standpoint, I don't have that offhand, but that was, besides capturing, what's that?
Go ahead. Yes, I'm saying okay.
Yeah. So besides capturing the the runoff within the hardscaped areas and the roof, we also wanted to make sure that we could better handle the way water was flowing towards the Ockerbloom residence to the south side here. So that's why that fill was, kind of necessary.
Okay, because it looks like you're going down from about 175 foot level to 171-ish, maybe in between.
and the top of wall, if you saw the clearer version,
Yeah. So
can you
that's just,
see?
I mean, I just want to point out that that a calculation of the amount of fill may be something the ZBA wants.
Okay.
Because one of the requirements is you minimize the amount of fill. And
Yep.
since you are actually putting fill into a substantial amount of that property, even if it is a small amount, I'm just concerned that when I see a retaining wall go across the entire length of that southern property, that's a lot of wall. So that's my concern.
So top of wall will slope as it goes from east to west. So that's what I mean by the wall never exceeding that 36-inch mark. So as if you're looking at this plan from bottom up, the wall is sloping down.
Just to reiterate there, Diab, so the wall is never over 3 feet. So it is going the entirety of the, yeah, but it is not going over 36 inches.
I completely accept that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just merely pointing out that it is running for approximately 246 feet, to give or take a few, which is a very long wall.
Yeah.
And that's just the size of that was not apparent to me looking at your drawings, because I was focusing in on the patio area, and the major construction of the wall is along the entire southern border, which again, it strikes me as quite big. Okay, I will shut up. Sally?
So in this view, this very view that we're looking at here, I noticed that the iron pin, so presumably this is a property line, intersects with the quote abutter's garden unquote, which presumably means the wall would intersect with the abutter's garden. Is that to say that just over time the abutter's garden has crept across the property line?
I don't know if you've seen the property in person or not, but there is an existing, you could call it a hedge. It's a mixed bag of thick buckthorn, burning bush, privet, a couple different types of plants that have all grown together and sort of hidden the property line. It's actually encroached more on the Tempestus side. But this packet, essentially that we're reviewing here, the Tempest, I gave this, the Tempestus, they gave it to the Aqua Blooms, to the Bataris, and to the Martins. So everyone's aware. And in our work agreement, if this all goes ahead, we will be refurbishing and moving the neighbor's garden for him.
That's nice, good, okay.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian, this is helpful, thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments from the board? Is the board ready to make a motion?
I make a motion to recommend favorable action.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Kurt,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
I Ching,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
and David says no on this one. Thank you all. We have a 4-1 vote, so no minority report. And good luck with your project.
All right, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let us move on to, we are 18 minutes over. What a surprise. So we have, we're supposed to be approving meeting minutes. So why don't we do that? And if we do that quickly, and I will promise not to say much, we can maybe spare some time for public outreach when we're done with it.
Just a very, I just need about 1 minute to get some water. So I will,
Okay.
I will return in 1 minute.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I had two minutes to review for this evening, and I would share my screen, but I am not a host. So we're reviewing the minutes for Tuesday, April 26th. Are there any comments? I think we can proceed. Sally?
So under updates, Chair Jarius A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line down, Mr. Zakali clarified that there was 13,000 available. Can I just clarify, where is that money from? What is that?
That's in the escrow.
It's in the, so this is a,
This was paid into by the developer as part of the escrow.
okay,
when they
so
develop the
it's
property.
in that escrow. Okay, in
Yep.
escrow. I
It's in
just,
escrow. Yep.
I think it would be helpful to add that to that document. And then I had a question on page 2, that under number 4, the second time Mr. Wang is cited. Oh, excuse me, on page 2, the very first bullet, Anderson and Krieger, it says page 1 correction. Anderson and Krieger is the name of the firm. So you would
Yes.
say Anderson and Krieger is misspelled. Or you could put an ampersand in there, whatever. That's really minor. But going back to number 4, second time Mr. Rufo speaks. This was, so continue presentation slides that included refining the vision for the, what does NMSC? Because I think it's of NMS, North Main Street.
It's the North Main Street corridor. And if you look at right where it says in the same number 4 shared
There it
areas.
is. I got it. Check, check.
Okay.
And then I want to say that it is one of 6 evolving opportunity areas.
Where it is.
That same sentence. So continue presentation slides that included refining the vision for the North Main Street corridor and 6 evolving opportunity areas. I don't know that we have form in place looking at all the opportunity areas.
Oh, I see your point. Yes. So
So that was that. I'm trying to go really fast. And then on page 3, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet, I didn't understand the second sentence. This is a parallel project to being the planning board representative for the Historic Commission. Can you clarify?
Sure. So we would have a separate liaison to the
Yeah, this
Sims
wasn't
Corner
about
Historic
liaison.
Study
This was a
Commission.
discussion about, what was this about? Prioritizing planning board goals.
Right. So that would be, I believe it is, we didn't have the Sims Corner Historic Study Committee on our list of liaisons, I
Oh, I
believe.
see.
And that's a separate position. And I
Great,
think,
okay,
I think we, Kurt was the one who signed up for that, I believe. I
Was
just
it,
want-
wasn't
hope
it?
that's not a surprise to you,
Was
Kurt.
it I Ching or was it Kurt?
I thought it was Kurt.
I thought it was Kurt too.
Thought it was Kurt too.
Okay, well, enough of us seem to think it was Kurt that we'll just agree it was Kurt. How's
Or
that?
Study committee, yeah, good.
Okay.
Brian, will you update that document and distribute it?
This is
I think I missed a little bit of the beginning of that.
Oh, it's just, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
our list of liaisons to other committees didn't include the
Sims Corner.
Sims Corner. And
Sure.
if you could add that to that.
Oh,
include
yes,
it,
it does. Local Historic District Sims Kurt Spring.
Well, then it's been updated since then. Okay. Brian
I
has
read your
done
mind.
this. Okay,
And then
so
going really quickly, those are my only,
I think the real substantive one was to indicate on number 4 that Foreman Place is only working on the North Main Street corridor. Is there a motion to accept
Yes. Oh,
as
sorry.
amended? Accept as amended? Yes.
Can I add an amendment?
Oh, yeah.
Just to the leaf blowers, 7.
Yep.
I would add the name of the group, Clean Quiet Winchester.
Sorry,
somewhere in there.
reverse that or scratch that and reverse it. It's quiet, clean.
Oh, Quiet Clean. Okay, and then and in some of the last sentences, they're not proposing to ban leaf blowers. I think it's this is fine, but there's just no mention that they're really trying to move them from whatever they're called, single
Gas
engine,
to gas to electric.
gas to electric, and that's not mentioned here. So I would.
Okay, so would you be so kind as to send that to Nancy?
Yes.
Excellent. So with those amendments, is there a motion to approve meeting minutes for Tuesday, April 26, 2022?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry.
Second.
I seconded.
Thank you. A car went by. All those in favor, Kurt,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Yi Ching,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
and Diab says aye as well. Thank you. Now on to Tuesday, May 17th. Any amendments to this?
I have one very minor one, and actually, I realize now it applies to page 2 of the minutes we just approved, that form in place is spelled form and then a plus sign place. It's just silly, but that's the edit.
Oh,
That's
I
the
see.
only one.
Yes, the
that's-
ampersand is replaced by a plus.
Well, it's on page 2, there's an ampersand, and on page 1, there's an A&D, and on page 2 of the previous minutes, there's an A&D, and we can just make them make our plus sign. It's no big deal. That's all I
Okay.
have.
Okay, excellent. If you would send that on to Nancy, appreciate that. Any
Okay.
other corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, May 17th, 2022? As amended.
So moved.
Second.
I second it.
Okay, roll call vote. Kurt,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Yi Ching,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
and Diab says aye as well. Thank you very much. That's it for our minutes. And then we have approximately 5 minutes to talk about education and outreach. So I suggest we spend those 5 minutes. How shall we spend those 5 minutes? Brian,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'd be very interested to hear you give a preamble on this agenda item.
A preamble. Well, I think there are, we've spoken, I guess, a little about this before in terms of how do we improve our outreach to the town. And we talked about putting together some sort of a publication or something. Brian and I had a talk about how we could improve our, tell me if I get this wrong, Brian, how we could improve the quality of our presentations and maybe consider using some of our consultant money to hire someone who actually knows how to put on a public forum. We are all volunteers, and my skills in that area are minimal. And I know that in the past, when, for instance, the MAPC or and when Jennifer Goldson et al. Put on the public fora for the master plan, they did an amazing job. They had the technology, they had the resources to put together a very polished, very well designed forum. And I think that one of the things Brian and I were talking about is one of the things we could do is to not, just do it by ourselves, but to consider getting into professionals. One of the things I think we learned from the trees working group is we did hire someone to produce the flyers and the sign, and it was amazing. It was a really professional, it really, I think, raised the level of our discourse because it wasn't just, someone putting something into PowerPoint. So that's one thing I think we should think about. The other thing is in terms of how do we want to start reaching out to the community, things like meeting with precinct heads or precinct chairs, focusing on particular precincts. And so we could say every month we would invite someone from one of the precincts and say, why don't you come in and spend 20 to 25 minutes talking to us about what your precinct thinks is a concern. Those are other ways of doing it. I mean, this is kind of brainstorming here in terms of bringing input in. And then also, I know that our website could use some help. One of the things we might think about, and Brian, I don't know if you had a chance to reach out to Capital and see whether we could get money to have someone do our website. I mean,
I have not done that.
Yeah, you've been under the weather. So one of the things is capital planning asks people if they have any projects for that we could request monies from the capital improvement account. And I think they just sent out a request to all the departments and boards, or all the departments. I don't know what technically counts as a capital project. So this would be another way. We haven't talked about getting our website improved for years, and just volunteer level of effort doesn't seem to be, we don't have enough resources. So if we can hire someone for a couple $1,000s, I think it would be money well spent instead of just kicking it down the road. We do have money in our budget for consultants. We should consider using it. So those are my ideas, and that's kind of kicking it off.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, over the past several years, even, so I've been here 8 years, Diab's been on the board 5 years?
6. This is my
6
7th.
years. So it was pre-Diab as well. So those first couple of years, there was always this talk about why doesn't the planning board have a seasonal event, 4 events a year where they showcase what they're trying to do over, and progress of what they're trying to do, and then trying to elicit feedback on how well or how bad they're doing it. So this was just an idea, and people were like, yeah, that's a good idea, but then it never really went anywhere. The other idea was a quarterly newsletter, or something that's not just a weekly updates, but more like a report. So those were the 2 ideas that seemed to gain interest, but just never, events, as some of the people on the planning board know, it takes a long time to get a good event off the ground. Just to have a tabling event for the trees group, for the trees working group, it took, several months to almost 4 months. I think if it was on a more regular basis, it would take less on-ramp time to do that. It could potentially be, more efficient use of time if we just make those regular. So that's where it came from, and maybe it'll just be like the same conversations we had. It was like, yeah, that's a good idea, and then it goes off into the ether again. But Sally, you're muted.
I would like to pick up on the notion of the precinct chairs. The precinct chairs are a connection to the town meeting members who are in each precinct, and they are a connection to all the residents of every precinct. And every one of our projects that comes onto the planning board agenda, well, not everyone, some of them, maybe many of them, are precinct specific. And so, like, for an example, for this evening, we would have, under this paradigm, sent a personal invitation to the precinct chairs for the precincts that are covered by the neighborhoods that the corridor revitalization covers. I'm sorry that I don't know that. Is it 1 and 2? Because I don't know my precinct map very well.
It's 1 and 8, right?
1 and 8. So, and then you would say to them,
2 and 8.
Whichever. So this is just a case in point. And Diab, you're muted. But just, we would say to them, please reach out to the chair or the town planner to find out more and find out what we can provide to you that you could provide to your town meeting members, that your town meeting members could provide to their neighborhood constituents about this project. We really want everyone to be aware, and this is one way of doing it. So it's kind of like this feeder. So that's one idea that I had. And then the other idea that I had was that maybe it's overlapping with that, is in advance of each planning board meeting, once the agenda is set, that almost immediately thereafter, an email goes out to the people who have expressed an interest in receiving information from the planning board, which I understand the list gets longer and longer because people really like Brian's updates, that would say, heads up, this is on the agenda for the next planning board meeting, and these are the issues, or don't give an opinion, don't editorialize, just stick what they say in Dragnet, stick to the facts, ma'am. But just say this is on the agenda and this is coming, because it's a way of pushing our activity out, because right now the town exists in a pull environment. If you want to know what's going on, you grovel around in the website and you pull it into you. So this is just brainstorming ways to push our activity and our discussions out.
Well, I would take it even a step further, Sally, from what you're saying, which is like, I don't even think people go to the website. Like, I don't think people know what's
Well,
on the website. People just like, no one knows what's going on. I mean, I think the challenge is like, how do you actually get it? How do you get information to people who aren't going to seek it out because they aren't, and like, they're not going to attend our quarterly, seasonal event, and they're not going to read a newsletter that like comes to their email because like that isn't how they operate. They don't have time. It's not a priority. I mean, like, this is not an actual real suggestion, but I mean, like, the way people find out about things are like banners at the transfer station, banners on the bridge going through town, like signs at Starbucks on the window. I mean, like, those are the places, like the touch points where people are always going through, and like that's where they see about current events and like what's happening. And I know that's not a realistic suggestion, but I mean, like, we almost have to get a little more grassroots and try and like figure out avenues. And like, I'm not a social media guy necessarily, but like Winchester Facebook page, I can tell you that stuff spreads like wildfire. Like, people love it. And so, I mean, if you want to post something, and people did, right, with our hearings for Waterfield, a number of the people who regularly attend our meetings posted links to the meetings on the Winchester Facebook page. And frankly, we had a lot of people attend those meetings. And I think that's probably in part why we did.
So I am really ignorant of this whole Facebook thing. So is it possible if the town of Winchester had its own Facebook account
We do.
that the residence page would automatically follow it? Is that a thing that happens? Like in Twitter, you can follow other Twitter accounts. Is there a way of asking whoever manages the residence page to automatically have it repost things from the town's Facebook page?
I can look into that. I don't know. But I mean, I think that happens organically, like all the time. Like Kurt was saying, that people repost off of the town, but the town does have its own Facebook and Twitter feed.
Then we did not, for instance, maybe we should put the Holton Street one out on the town's Twitter and Facebook feeds.
I think it's a really, I was going to mention this earlier, maybe to you, Brian. Like, I don't know what we as planning board members are allowed to do and not do. Like, I'm not inclined to like post something on the Winchester Facebook page because I'm part of the planning board. I don't know if that looks like
You can always post about meetings. That's one thing you don't have to ask permission for. You don't have to do anything. You can say, here's our meeting, come to it. It'll be great. Like, you can promote meetings all day.
Okay.
I mean, I think that I don't know how Facebook groups work. There must be someone who set it up and who manages that. If we can reach out to them and just have them,
I can reach out to them.
I'll see if there's a way of automatically bringing stuff in from the town's Facebook page. I think that depending upon the goodwill of residents to repost for us, I'm concerned that will be, I just would,
No, it's not enough. Yeah, but I think you're right. But Brian, is there like a designated like communications person for the town of Winchester, someone in charge of social media for the town of Winchester? Like, does that role exist?
Yes, it does. So that is mostly Jennifer Caffarella through the manager's office.
Okay.
But she's not the only person, but she does the bulk of the outreach communication. That might change, not because of her or anything, but because of the communications group that has the committee that has started. So it's possible they might be starting to take over that. Like, I really have no idea. Jen is the point person. She's great. She's super responsive. She can get anything out very quickly. Fully behind her. She's great.
So let's just get Jen to put stuff out for the Holton Street.
I have, and that's already been up. It should be up on the website on the carousel, as well as having those flyers were sent to her.
No. I mean social media, as in Facebook and Twitter.
Yes. Okay. I can do that as well. It might have already gone up, but maybe it was. I will find that out. It might have already gone up and on the bottom of people's feeds, but I can ask to punch that up for the next 2 weeks.
I mean, it's also the kind of thing, like, if someone just gets like, it would almost be great if like that person who's in charge of for the town would like look at the agenda of public meetings for the day and like that morning like blast on like the Facebook page is like, these 4 meetings are scheduled today. Here are the Zoom links. Like, you should attend.
So there is a level of that as well. But
Jen wears a lot of hats.
She does.
And so this is something that, Yeah,
I think it does
yeah.
it automatically though. So I think it, like I said, when there is a meeting or an event, but clearly I need to get some more clarification on that from her.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's old-fashioned technology which the town's website does actually support, which are RSS and Atom feeds, and I get all of my stuff from there. But Sally's had her hand up very patiently.
Yeah, I'm practicing patience.
Oh,
So-
then you don't get to talk yet.
So I was wondering if the planning board could invite one or a couple members of the communications study committee to come to a planning board meeting to talk to us about our concerns and perhaps give us a preview of what some of the suggestions that have been coming up from that work, so that we can start to dovetail our needs with their conversations.
That's an excellent idea. Can you send email as well as I have it written down.
Oh,
but if
you want me to email you? I can
If you
do
could
that.
also just email Brian so that it's got more than one point of failure.
Yes, I will email you and Brian.
One of the other, and I think we've gone beyond our time.
We have.
One of the other suggestions from years past was to have a sort of a town government day where we would have a bunch of committees and the town clerk give like a 2-hour presentation on how the town works. And so you would have, boards, so people would understand how the different cogs fit together. So that's a little more abstract than just focusing in on the planning board, and it obviously requires more coordination with other parts of town government.
I wonder if that's something that the League of Women Voters have done before, and maybe we can ask them to do again.
We should, Rich has his hand up. Rich?
Hey, Rich.
Okay, maybe Rich doesn't have his hand up.
He does have his hand up. Rich, you're muted, Rich.
I'm
There you go.
muted. This is new technology. Befuddles me. No, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that the Communications Study Committee is having a meeting tomorrow at noon for anyone who's via Zoom. If anyone is,
Are you on the committee?
no, I'm not, but I do follow their work.
Yeah.
Okay, so tomorrow at Zoom, which you can find that link probably
And you
on
can
the
find
town's
that
calendar.
on the town. That's on the town's calendar.
Yep.
All the pre-registration information for that. So
Okay, thank you.
if somebody from the planning board wanted to go on there and bring up these points that you mentioned tonight in tonight's meeting.
Okay.
I wanted to comment on your preamble, Deb, and I think that the focusing money on the website and some graphic help would be great for us. I think that, I know that not a lot of people go to the planning board website because it's dull and it's really dry. And I think, if we could use graphic arts to help people understand how, relevant this stuff might be to them, I think it would be really helpful. So I think, yes, investing in consultant help with those things would be a really good bang for our buck there. Website graphics. And then, if you just had a graphic that was really captivating, it could be blasted on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter or whatever. And that I think is way more effective than like droning on about, stuff.
Thank you for that vote of confidence, droning on.
It's 9:43.
Yes, let's keep going. I just want to say, if everyone goes out and look at other towns' planning board websites, there are a lot that look exactly like ours because they came from the same software company, and there are some that are just amazing. They have visual guides and flow charts. They really bring the planning to the people. So a lot of things. So any other ideas, or should we just move to adjourn?
We can move to adjourn, but I just want to say, will you send us any list of websites that you found that you like? And then I would like to make a motion to end the meeting.
I did this about 4 years ago when I was first enamored and thought I had time. So I would have to redo the research.
Oh, well, then we will. We'll just do it. Everyone will
Okay.
just look.
I can send some around.